What's up, everybody? Hope you're doing great today. Uh, it's time for another cook up, but today it's going to be a little bit different. I woke up this morning, it was raining outside, and it made me want to do a classic lo fi beat with some rain foley in the background and some anime samples in it, because who doesn't love that? So I did a poll on Instagram to see what anime you guys wanted in there, and I got a suggestion of this movie that I almost completely forgot about called Grave of the Fireflies. And it has arguably one of the most emotionally intense scenes of like all time, basically. So that's what we're going to be using today. And I say it's a little bit different because instead of just making a lo-fi track, arranging it in almost like a song format, it's going to be more of a scoring type of project. So with that said, let's dive in. Okay, so we're here in Ableton. I've got the clip already loaded in. You'll hear plenty of it, but I'll just scrub through, show you that we have the video for this whole scene here. And what I'm going to do starting off, just to kind of lay the foundation of some ideas and then go back through and clean it up. I've got the soft piano by Labs, one of my all-time favorite just go-to piano plugins. And then at the same time, I'm also going to be recording the pad. So I've got Omnisphere, Agape Warmth. I tweaked a little bit, but not too much. I just kind of, as you can see from this EQ here, rolled off some of the highs and put a low shelf on the bottom just to make sure it didn't get really thick and muddy down there. But it gives us something like this, which is all types of emotional. So what I'm going to do starting out is just hit record, find a good place to actually come in. I don't want the music to start right away. And like I said, I'll lay a few ideas down, see what type of motifs I want to keep and what I can go back and fix.
I brought you something special, and I know that you're gonna like it.
This scene is so sad.
Have one.
Setsuko, what?
Rice balls. I made them for you. Here. Have one. You don't want them?
Setsuko? Look, it's a watermelon, and I didn't even have to steal it. Here, eat it.
It's good.
Hold on to this, and I'll go make us some rice gruel with eggs. I'll leave the melon here for you. Okay?
Satan. Thank you.
Okay, got about halfway through the length of this thing, and I played a few different ideas, but I honestly kind of liked my first idea the most. So I'm going to go back, listen to it, and chop it down and maybe just start repeating some of that. So one thing that happened was I was playing to the track, to the video track. So I ended up actually going off of the metronome by a quarter note. So I slid the video track down a quarter note, and I'm going to move all of my MIDI notes over like that. And the nice thing about recording both the piano and the pad at the same time is that I can just drag and drop, copy and paste both of these, rename them so I can keep track. And let's see how this lines up now.
I made them for you. Here, have one.
That lined up pretty well. Gonna get rid of these extra notes on the end. And there are some lower notes. Like if you look down here, my Fs were Fs and Gs were a little bit before the measure. So I'm just gonna slide those over a little bit. I don't need it to be perfect, but once I start adding other stuff to the track, I want to be able to rely on the click sum still. Okay, so all that I've done so far is I cleaned up the MIDI tracks a little bit, and then I just copied the root of those MIDI tracks and I made a low pad. Um, it's basically just a synth bass. It's a triangle wave, so you don't really hear it much. You just kind of feel those low frequencies, and it just helps fill the space a little bit more. For now, they're all just going at the same time, but I will most likely, kind of have a little step progression where some instruments come in after others and all that sort of good stuff. But for now, I have that main motif playing a couple times through, and I think I might change the idea, because the scene kind of has a little bit of a makes you want to have a mood shift.
It's good.
So right there, he has a little smile on his face. So we're gonna make it feel a little bit hopeful, and then you'll see what's coming next. So if we want something to be hopeful, there's a few approaches you can do, but one of them is to start on the 4 chord. That already it's open and it's kind of in between, right? Because it feels a little hopeful, but now it just depends on where we go. If we go down, that feels a little bit kind of like a kind of more of a chill type of vibe. If we go up, it makes it a little bit more hopeful. So that's one of like the approaches you can take. There's no one size fits all in music, but a good rule of thumb is if you want something to be happy or hopeful, you go up in the order of chords or the sequence of chords. If you want possibly something kind of sad, like we started with 6, a minor chord, which is automatically setting us up to have a more melancholy feel. And then we go down to the 4. So going down helps that. If we went from the 6 and we went up to the 1, that kind of destroys that melancholy feel that we had. So let's see what kind of hopeful feelings we can invoke. So I'm going to just loop this part of the scene and let a few ideas roll around and see what feels the best.
Hold on to this, and I'll go make us some rice gruel with eggs. I'll leave the melon here for you. Okay?
Satan, thank you.
There were some ideas in there. There were some ideas. I like the back half, but I think the beginning could have a little bit more emotional charge to it. So let's try it again.
Hold on to this, and I'll go make us some rice gruel with eggs. I'll leave the melon here for you. Okay?
Santa. Thank you.
Okay, that was much more what I was looking for. Okay, on to the next part of the scene. I cleaned up the MIDI from this last part, and I think it's about time we revisit that original motif. So before I do anything else, I'm just going to copy it on over. And I'm also going to have to figure out some timing because there's going to be a little bit of space. So this is how the last scene ends.
She never woke up.
So I'm going to actually just add an extra bar of space, basically, and come right in here on measure 42. So go ahead and play that, and let's see what that's like. And if you're wondering, these ending parts where it just kind of has a harsh cut, I'm going to go in and clean all of that up when I'm doing the arrangement process after I freeze and flatten all of the MIDI tracks. But during the writing process, I'm not gonna mess with any of that because I want to be sure I can go back and edit my MIDI before I turn it into a WAV file.
She never woke up.
Okay, so here's the plan. As you can tell,
Woke up.
obviously the video doesn't line exactly up with the grid here. So I need right there to have some type of audio transition. And I told you at the very beginning, I wanted to have a lo-fi track with some thunderstorm foley. So let me find something that we can use. Okay, so the last thing that you saw me do in the track was start to look for some foley to add in with it to go along with what the video was doing. My camera stopped recording and I got really carried away throughout the night. So let's dive in and kind of just check out all the changes that I made, the things that I added, and then we'll watch the whole thing. So here we are in the project. And as you can see, I got very carried away with this. There are so many tracks and we'll go through what they all are. So starting off, all of my instruments I put inside of a group because I'm doing some volume automation to help with some dynamics for the overall mood. And then inside the instrument group, I have a group of strings with violin, a viola, and a cello, French horn, some bells, and then the three tracks that started this whole thing off, the soft piano with a pad underneath it, and then a low pad for kind of a bass synth type of vibe. And then I have another pad that I added that's kind of a moving pad, kind of a glitter crystal type of sound. And as you notice, as I kind of click through these, they are all audio tracks now. They're not MIDI because I froze and flattened all of them. I really like to do that when I'm doing the mixing and editing and arranging because I like shaping the sound waves more. And if I scroll in, you can see that I do some fading, which is much easier to do when you're working with actual sound files instead of MIDI tracks. So because I did that, in case I ever wanted to come back and edit anything, I saved all of my MIDI up here in its own group and then just deactivated everything. And I took all the instruments off once I was sure that I was happy with the final sound. that's a good tip for anybody that's working on a machine that is struggling to keep up with a bunch of plugins. I started doing this on my old laptop because it just couldn't cut it, and it's a nice organizational method for me now. Because actually, when I was working on some of this, there were some parts where my bass note, my root notes, didn't line up with some of my instruments, and so I was able to hop back in over to the MIDI and reprint a revised version of it and drag and drop it back down here. So that is a great method to help your overall computer just handle the project when you have a bunch of tracks with a bunch of plugins, as well as just keep yourself organized. And another thing I like to do is you can, if I open them up here again, any MIDI track, let's say you have a chord progression that you really like, you can right click and then you can export the MIDI clip and you can create your own kind of loop packs or MIDI packs or whatever it is for yourself or for others. But that's really great if you maybe you're doing like a video game sound design project and you want there to be some continuity throughout the game. Maybe there's a specific motif or chordal line or something like that. If you print your or if you export your MIDI track, you can re-import it to all the other projects, move the key around, change the instrument that specific MIDI track is using, all that good stuff. So save your MIDI. It once you uh, like turn all the channels off and remove the plugins, it doesn't take any more CPU power to just save them up here. And MIDI tracks are really small, so it won't make your project file huge either. So continuing on through all these tracks I've got. Um, we finished off the instrument group with the new pad, and then that moves us down to my choir group. Towards the end, I added first some lower octave male choir ahs, and then some higher pitched child choir ahs. And then this middle track here, if it was up to me, I would have rearranged this. This track is the Grave of Fireflies track that has the video and audio attached to it. But anytime I try to move it around, Ableton just crashes. I have no idea why. This is the first time it's happened to me. So probably just a bug with maybe this particular session file. But it's gonna live there smack in the middle, and that's okay. So underneath that, we've got the drum group. Starts off with the kick. Um, and then I have a top group. And I like to do this sometimes, especially if I'm doing a more electronic type of session. If I'm using real instruments, I group things differently. But if it's all electronic or if they are one hits or anything like that, then I will group all the top together because on this channel, it's going through Sapphire to add a little bit of warmth. And then I can EQ everything and also compress it in its own way. I'm using the Shep's Parallel Particles compressor on a lot of stuff. It's a really cool dynamic compressor that also looks very cool, but it sounds great. And then another thing, if you've watched some of the other CookUps, you've seen this approach before, but I have two chains going on the top group for my drum track. And I have one that is an effects that I just left named chain, and then I have a dry channel. And what you can do with this, it's sort of like you are using a send, but it's all just on whatever track it's built into. So the cool thing is my dry, it will still have all the audio come out dry, not affected at all. No change to it other than this EQ to help shape it a little bit. And then I have a chain that is actually affected with some reverb, the good old Valhalla vintage verb, one of my favorites, as you know. And the reason I do this is because on the drum track, especially with snares, you want some of that reverb, or I wanted some of that reverb, but I didn't want it to get the mid range and make it sound like it was this huge bass filled drum sound. So I plopped an EQ on there and got this nice little range, a little bit under 1K, kind of consolidated here. And then that frequency group is what's going through the verb. And I did it this way because I wanted, like I said before, the pure dry sound to completely come through unaffected and then adding a little bit of reverb on top. And yeah, I could have, created another send down here, another return, and I could have used that, which I've done before. And I do that quite a bit, especially if I have like a lot of stuff from the percussion section of my arrangement that I want to use the same reverb or the same compressor or any of that stuff on. But this, I only wanted it for these 4 tracks. They're already grouped next to each other. And, I wanted to do a few other things to them. Pre and post the reverb. So that's why I did it this way. It's a cool little trick that I learned a while ago, and it can be really fun when you're just trying to do sound design and create some new sounds. So I've got 2 snares stacked on top of each other to give it a little bit more character and girth. And then I have a little snare roll that's here and there for some flavor. And I included the crash in this group because I wanted it to be compressed and have that reverb added with the rest of the top group. So with the rest of the snares. So outside of the top group, I have some bells and another percussion instrument. I didn't really have a good name for it, so I just call it perk. I have a reverse effect, and then I have a rain stick. So coming up next is the foley section, which is where the video left off before I went kind of wild, adding a bunch of other stuff to it. So I have thunder for when the scene changes and it starts to rain. Then when the scene moves indoors, I have some rain on the roof foley going, so it sounds like you're kind of following the character inside. And then the scene changes in the video to be sunny outside. So I added some bird foley and some meadow foley. And then there's a section where a match is being lit. And at first, I wasn't going to add this much sound design to it, this many effects. But it felt kind of odd having the environmental sounds happening and not having the sound of the match strike. So I went ahead and added some match foley and some bonfire foley for the fire that takes place. And then at the very end, almost an afterthought, I just added an atmosphere effect. Usually for the different effects that I have, the risers and the impacts and all of that, the white noise, those types of things, I'll put all those in a group. Since this was such an afterthought and I don't have a bunch of those types of effects, I just left it in the Foley group and nothing is really happening to the Foley group. I just use that to stay organized because when you have a bunch of tracks, and you're scrolling through trying to find something, it's really nice to be able to just close these all down and then you can kind of get your bearings for where everything is like that. So, with all of that said, let's watch the video.
I brought you something special, and I know that you're gonna like it.
Say, Dad, have one.
Setsuko, what?
Rice balls. I made them for you. Here, have one. You don't want them?
Setsuko? Look, it's a watermelon, and I didn't even have to steal it. Here, eat it.
It's good.
Hold on to this, and I'll go make us some rice gruel with eggs. I'll leave the melon here for you. Okay?
Satan.
Hmm?
Thank you.
She never woke up.